Hello and welcome to episode number 35 of Chel Squared. I'm your host, Andrew Chelney, and as usual, we've got a ton to talk about today. Before we get into it here, please make sure to follow the podcast on Twitter at Chel Squared and on Facebook at Chel Squared for more hot takes, news about future guests, poll questions, and a whole lot more. Please rate the show if you enjoy listening. It means a lot to me. And every time you either like the show on SoundCloud, give it a rating on iTunes, follow it on Spotify, etc. A puppy gets a hug from its owner. I don't make the rules here, just making sure you are in the know. If you prefer listening to podcasts on YouTube, search Chel Squared Podcast, and the show is there too. Recording on Wednesday night as opposed to Thursday due to scheduling. Hope you aren't too mad at us. Well, I mean, at least not as mad as people get when they lose their sports bets. I've seen those people firsthand, and I'm sure you have as well, and they are not fun people to be around when bets don't work out. Speaking of bets, I've never put money on anything, and I wouldn't even know where to start. The guest I have on has been betting for a considerable amount of time and is here to hold my hand as well as yours as he takes us through a course on how to bet and bet smartly. We'll also discuss how to pick and choose your battles and not bet blindly. The guest who I will introduce in a second here wrote a fantastic article the other day for Daily Faceoff about understanding the concept of value betting. I was told there would be no math in this industry, and there was some math in the article, so needless to say, I got a shiver down my spine. Also, how does a bettor estimate winning percentages exactly? As long as nuclear code level secrets aren't being discussed here, put that down on the list of things we will talk about. The guest this week is a hockey analyst for Vegas Stats and Information Network, or VSiN for short. What does that mean exactly? You know, a job title is specific and specialized when you read it and go, what exactly does that entail? Also, the trade deadline is less than 2 weeks away. The Blues out of nowhere are in a playoff spot. The Avalanche are continuing their free fall and are currently out of a playoff spot now. Chicago has been surging too, 7-3 in their last 10 games as they set 4 points behind the Wild for the final wild card spot in the West. Are the Blues now buyers in this market? If you said that to me in November, I would have laughed in your face. How confident are they in a push? Who will be the biggest buyer at the deadline this season? Lots of names being thrown out there and a lot of rumors flying around the mill. There's a lot to discuss. So we'll talk about all of that, of course, the poll question, and a whole lot more. Joining me this week is VSiN hockey analyst, Daily Faceoff contributor, co-host of the Tic Tac Tout podcast, sports bettor, and according to his Twitter bio is Dad AF, Andy MacNeil. Andy, what's up?
Oh, nothing much, Andrew. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited to talk a little bit about sports betting. And yeah, I am Dad AF. That's the most important thing in my bio, my little boy.
So before we get into the super nitty-gritty here, $1 million question for you. So game 7 of a playoff series, right? Let's say hypothetical here. Game is tied, final minutes of the third period. Both goaltenders for a team go down, and the emergency goaltender has to step in and play. Now, let's say you are the emergency tendy in this situation. Which team would you rather play for and why? Now, don't give me an obvious answer. Don't give me the Lightning. That's too easy. Give me a team that you would prefer playing in that situation.
I'd say probably the Vegas Golden Knights. They don't allow a lot of high-quality chances, and I think they'd give me the best shot to win the game or to help them win the game.
That's interesting. I was thinking about choosing a team that I have some invested interest in, right? As a Rangers fan, I would love to play for the Rangers, but you think about it and your emotions might get the best of you in that situation, right? Your nerves might kind of overtake your position in a way. So I would have to say, out of all the teams that are in the league, besides some easy ones like the Lightning, I would have to play for a Western Conference team. I think that because I'm not invested in any Western Conference team, I mean, I would probably be a Jets fan if the Rangers somehow just didn't exist one day. I love the way they play the game. But I would have to choose either a St. Louis or a Minnesota just because I'm not emotionally invested in the team specifically. So it would be easier nerves-wise, I feel like, to play for one of those teams than a hometown team because the expectations are zero anyway. You're an emergency goaltender. Now it's up to you to step in and take on the role. If you succeed, you're a hero, and if you lose, well, you're an emergency backup goaltender. So there's nothing really riding your curtails except for your nerves and obviously the playoff series. But again, because you're the emergency goaltender, there's not a whole lot of expectation on you personally. So I have
listen,
to.
My dad is a very passionate Boston Bruins fan, so my first choice would be the Boston Bruins, but he would disown me and possibly injure me if I was the reason they lost the playoff series. So that's why I didn't go with the Boston Bruins.
That's a very fair answer. It's definitely, I feel like it'd be too scary, just to play for your favorite team in that situation and everything riding on it, the series, the entire playoffs, the entire city watching you. I mean, the entire state watching you in some areas. And it's if you mess up and it's all your fault, then it's definitely a tough one to swallow. That's for sure.
Yeah, and speaking of being a Boston Bruins fan, I grew up on the east coast of Canada in a small town, mostly populated by Montreal Canadiens fans. So I definitely had a rough time as a youngster. I grew up in the 90s, early 2000s. So we lost a lot of playoff series to the Montreal Canadiens, and there was days that I did not want to go to school the next day.
Can't blame you. Cannot blame you at all. So you've been betting for a considerable amount of time. What got you, before we get into the deep stuff about betting and everything that I talked about in the intro, what got you into sports betting? Was there a particular instance, or what was it kind of a snowball effect of this seems interesting, I'm going to give this a shot, and then just kind of went on from there? What was the first point that you decided, okay, I kind of want to do this now?
Well, before I was even legally of age, I always partook in some sports betting activities, whether it was some fantasy drafts, or here in Canada we have parlay cards, so you can play put together a ticket with more than two teams and hopefully win. The odds are not good, but I was doing that when I was very young and was always kind of interested in it, but mostly it was just for fun. And as I mentioned, I was the most diehard of diehard Boston Bruins fans out there. And when they won the Stanley Cup in 2011, I hate to say it, but that was the peak. And I kind of lost interest in the entire sport in a lot of ways. I don't want to say I lost interest in it, but I just didn't have as much vested interest in the sport. And I don't really remember what it was, but one day I kind of sat down and said, you know what, I'm going to take this stuff seriously. I think I could be good at this. I'm a pretty numeric person. I kind of always looked at things probabilistically. So the more and more I started to research and educate myself on the world of sports betting and gambling in general, the more I became interested in it. And now, it's really, if you took my ability to bet on sports away, I probably wouldn't even watch sports anymore. That's what I live for now. It's what I'm passionate about is the betting aspect of sports.
Well, you wrote an article a couple of days ago, yesterday actually. Last summer, you asked 500 sports bettors what was most important to them, and approximately 68% of respondents were objectively wrong. What does that mean, and what is value betting in a nutshell? Because there are some formulas in this article. And again, I went into media and broadcasting. One of the reasons why, because I am terrible at math, and and everything that you were talking about in this article, while very interesting to me personally as someone that doesn't have anything, I don't know anything about betting besides the super basic of, okay, what's the over, what's the under here. Tell me what this article, what it says. Hold my hand here for a little bit. What does that mean? What is value betting, and what does it mean to be objectively wrong at what you asked?
That statement was apparently a little controversial because almost all of the replies that I got on Twitter pertaining to that article were kind of objecting my what I believe is a fact. A lot of people, when you ask them what the most important aspect of sports betting is, they'll tell you bankroll management or money management. And sure, that's important, but if you do not have value, then you're really not. You're really just prolonging the inevitable. And what I mean by value is when you estimate the odds better than the bookmaker did. If you somehow estimated that a team has a 60% chance of winning a game, and the money line odds that the bookmaker is offering suggested that they had, let's say, a 53% chance of winning, that's value. You now have a positive profit expectation. You can expect to make money if you made that bet over and over again. And then on the other side of the coin, if you believe a team will lose, maybe you've estimated that a team will only win a game 41% of the time, but the bookmakers' odds suggest or imply that a team will win 35% of the time, then you also have value in this situation too. So that's a bet. It's a bet that you would expect to lose more often than not, but the odds that you're betting or that you're playing are better than are less than the odds that you've estimated. So it's a tough concept for a lot of people, because I think what most people try to do is they pick based on who they think will win the game. And what they're doing is they're really substituting a difficult question with an easier question. So take the money line, for example. When you look at the board and you look at the different odds available on either team to win the game, most people just bet on the team that they think will win the game. They don't ever consider the fact that a losing team could be a team that's going to lose more often than not could be a good bet, because they're not thinking about sports probabilistically. So, in other words, value is all that matters. And like I said in the article, if you can find it, everything else will take care of itself. So people should concentrate on their pricing techniques when they get into sports betting. I mean, start trying to estimate what a team's chances are, start trying to estimate how many goals will be scored, and vice versa. Things like that. It's not the difference between a sharp sports bettor and a square sports bettor. And I'll get into what that is in a minute, but is a sharp sports bettor bets numbers. When they look at the board that has all the different games on it, they see numbers. They don't see teams. When a square bettor walks into a sports book, they see teams, and they start to make their decisions based on those teams. And that's really the difference between a square sports bettor, which most people are, unfortunately, and a sharp sports bettor, which only a very few people are.
You're blowing my mind right now. I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm over here just learning about a completely new world of analytics that obviously I thought existed, but being exposed to it now, I'm kind of just blown away, because this is It's kind of like teaching someone that has never played an instrument, the guitar, or trying to get them to read sheet music. It's like, I don't understand what is going on, but I believe what you're saying is 100% factual. And I'll I'll take your word for it, because I don't know any better here.
One thing I want to say about you mentioned the math in the article. It's pretty basic stuff. I'm not like a math whiz by any means. I know enough. I know what I need to know, basically. And the good thing about a lot of this is that it can be all easily done in something like Excel or Google Sheets. So you only really have to do a lot of the equation part once. You can kind of automate it so that you're not sitting down and really once you develop something that you feel comfortable with in terms of maybe a formula to help you estimate a team's chances of winning. You can put that into Excel and kind of automate everything, and it's not like you have to sit down and do math problems all day, right? So
sure, yeah. Because that would be rough. I feel like if that was what's actually going on, I feel like there would be less bettors, because that would just be super annoying to deal with. And I feel like it was harder prior to automation, like Excel and like Google Docs, because you had to do all of that by hand every day.
Well, I mean, sure, but at the same time, for a little while, the bookmakers had the same, or the bookmakers were kind of on a even playing field. It wasn't until, I don't know, sometime in the 80s or early 90s when someone in Vegas introduced like a more automated system. I forget. I'd have to look that up. It's actually pretty interesting. But I mean, for the longest time, a lot of this stuff was done manually, and a lot of people did very well. Like, if anything, it's harder today to be a winning sports bettor than it was 30 years ago, because we live in the age of information. Everybody knows everything about, like, when an injury happens. 20, 30 years ago, I mean, you might only know about that if you lived on one side of the country or, in one part of the world. And then the rest of the world had no idea because it had to travel to them, right? Through the newspaper, whatever. There was no internet, things like that. So it's a lot more difficult now because everybody has a lot of the same information, and it definitely makes it more difficult on people. I know one professional sports bettor who he's been around for a very long time, and hockey is his sport of choice and the sport that he's been very successful at betting. But he found the last number of years to be very hard on him because he felt like the industry was passing him by a little bit. He's an older gentleman. He's actually having a great year this year, but I mean, that I never really looked at it like that until I kind of saw him go through this, where, I mean, really he kind of lost his edge for a little bit, I guess. And it's tough because there are so many people competing for this, for the very little bit of money that's out there to be won. I mean, this is an industry where very few people win and everybody else loses.
That's a sort of a morbid way to put that, but you're right in the sense that, again, there's not a lot of winning going on, but there is a definite amount of losing, which is how books keep their books open, I guess, right? I mean, if everyone won, then they would be out of business pretty shortly. I would have to guess.
Yeah.
So how does a bettor estimate what a value bet is? How do you estimate a winning percentage on a team? How does that all happen?
Well, I like to say I can't make somebody a profitable sports bettor. I can only help to make them a wiser sports bettor. Because if I gave away the things that have made me a profitable sports bettor, they wouldn't be valuable anymore after a little while. But now, with that being said, there's a ton of, like, even a site like Hockey Reference, you can get all the historical data there and start to look at, how teams have performed in certain situations. What's the overall winning percentage of a home team? How has that changed over the years? And start to go from there. I mean, I really don't think it's as difficult to at least start to estimate the odds of or the chances of a team winning. And because really, that's when you asked me this question, I was so excited because on the one hand, I can't really answer it to the fullest, but
Hmm.
at the same time, that's the question that you're being asked when you're looking at a money line market, or looking to make a bet on a team to win a game. That's the question that you're being asked. Are these chances better or worse than the chances that I've estimated? Not who will win the game. Like, I've rolled in sharp circles or circles with sharp gamblers for the better part of the last decade. And something that is never talked about is who is going to win the game. It's not a topic that anybody discusses. It's, are their chances better or worse than the chances that I've estimated for them? And I think at the heart of becoming a successful sports bettor, or even just not a square, I guess I would say, is it, just sit down, man, and pull out a piece of paper and start to decide what a fair price is on a team. I mean, some things are pretty obvious, like what's a game on Thursday, like the Tampa Bay Lightning and Dallas Stars. Well, obviously, Tampa Bay is going to be the favorite there. There's no
Sure.
way that Dallas is going to be the favorite in Tampa Bay on the
No,
road.
not at all.
No. So, I mean, could you justify a bet on the Dallas Stars? Sure, you could. If you felt that their odds were better than the odds that the bookmaker were offering. But does that mean you think they're going to win the game? No, it doesn't. I mean, anybody who is out there and has that much of a difference of opinion there, and like, this is all built on a difference of opinion. If there was no differing opinions, then we wouldn't have anything to bet on because everybody would think the same way, right?
Hmm.
But it's just a matter of finding out what works and what doesn't, canceling out the noise, untangling the skill from the luck, in a lot of situations, whether it's home ice advantage. So, on average or overall over the last 10 or 11 years, the home team has won 55% of the games. Now, does that mean the home team gets a 5% advantage or 3%? How much of that is luck or noise? I mean, these are questions that you have to ask, and you can start to estimate a team's chances. Like, for instance, if you do think that an average home team playing an average road team is going to win 55% of the time, then a fair money line would be roughly minus 120. So anything lower than minus 120, let's say the bookmaker is offering minus 110 on the home team, and you've got it lined at minus 120 because you think these teams are of equal talent, then you'd have enough to justify a bet, maybe, right? But really, I think historical data is the first step to kind of understanding things from a probabilistic standpoint, and looking at things in terms of what are the chances of this happening, and not so much will this happen or will it won't happen, right? Religious determination or religious determinism is, there's really no place for that in the world of sports betting.
So there's a lot of books open, right? There's a lot of bettors. There's a lot of people that are offering betting advice to people, to other people. But what is the difference between a good bettor or a good bettor that gives advice versus a not great bettor or someone that doesn't give great advice? Because the line is so fine, right? In the world, because either you win or you lose. There's no, or you could push, I guess. But there's a very fine line between making money and losing money in this industry. So what in your mind, where is that line, and what do you define that line to be? The difference between someone that is successful in betting long term, obviously, because there could be short term bettors that are successful that don't really have a clue about what they're doing. The difference between long-term bettors that understand what's going on, and do it properly versus someone that's on the very edge of the other side of that line where they're successful or they could be successful, but they're not doing one or two things correctly.
Yeah, you're right. I think there is a very fine line, but a lot of the time it comes down to risk management. A lot of smart people make good predictions, but aren't very good at managing their risk. And at the same, and then on the other side of things, the thing that, like I said, separates the squares from the sharps is squares bet teams and sharps bet numbers. So when I walk into a sports book or log in online and look at the board, I see, I see the team names, obviously, but I see numbers, and that's really all I see, and all I'm looking for is whether or not that number is advantageous. Um, I really try to preach having a plan and sticking to that plan, and I think that's another thing that separates people that are successful from the people that aren't. A lot of people, they don't go into each day with a plan on how they're going to bet things. They're they think they're in control, but they're not. Like, we like to think that we have reasons for doing the things that we do, but the reasons that we do those things aren't the reasons that we think they are. I'm sorry to go all galaxy brain here, but it's true, right? I mean, people don't challenge their own biases or their intuitive judgments. So let's say you really like a particular team. You think this team will, just roll over their opponents. Most people will go out and look for information that supports that. They won't consider any of the alternative viewpoints on the other side of things, and they're really locked into betting on one side or the other, and they're not even they're not even considering taking the other side. So if they like the over in a hockey game, they're not even thinking about betting the under. And a sharp sports bettor will be willing to bet either side of a game, like the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Vegas Golden Knights are playing. They're not locked on to either team. They're going to bet the team that offers the biggest advantage. So that's really the difference between the people that are successful and the people that aren't. And lastly, I guess luck is probably the next thing. You need to be lucky. It's there, especially in hockey. I mean, if you were to place, and people have done this, there's some great articles out there. I'll link you to some later. But people have placed the four major sports on what they call the luck skill continuum. So it's a spectrum with all skill on one side and all luck on the other. So the side with all luck would be like roulette, and the side with all skill would be like chess, right? And hockey's right in the middle. So there's a lot of luck involved in hockey. So the outcome doesn't always matter as much. And the last thing that I'll say is the people that are successful care more about beating the market and getting the best number, the best odds available on whatever event they're betting, more so than they do winning or losing. Most professional sports bettors that I know would rather get a great number and lose than get a bad number and win. As crazy as that sounds.
Because it's more about the process and knowing or being confident in your ability to know that you're right than it is to kind of just get a luck of the draw and be right without really having any knowledge of why you got it right.
For sure. And that's a lot of times success can blind people, right? Specifically, if we're talking about football, because there's a point spread involved, obviously that you can bet the money line and the total, but football lends itself more to the point spread. And typically what the odds that you have on a point spread are minus 110 on one side and minus 110 on the other. So if you remove the juice or the vigorish, the commission that the bookmaker charges, you're looking at about a 50% chance either way, right? So assuming that there are 50%, or that it is a 50% chance, and you are just basically flipping a coin. If you bet 100 football games like that over the course of a season, there's about a 1 in 3 chance that you would turn a profit based on nothing more than luck alone. So if 1,000 people go out and flip coins on 100 football games, there's a good chance. There's about 300 of them will end up turning a profit.
Wow.
And most of them will probably believe that they have some sort of, skill, right? So
the coin flipping skill.
Yeah.
So again, I don't know anything about this world. So if I were tomorrow decide, okay, I want to start betting, or I want to take betting more seriously, because again, I've never bet in my life, but I know people that do. What should I or someone in my position know prior to placing a bet? Whether, obviously, knowing the basics of betting is obvious, right? You need to know what the over is, what the under is, what the money line is, what all that means. You have to understand that. But past the vocabulary of betting, what do I and people like myself have to know prior to putting a single penny on any bet? What's the ABCs of betting besides obviously the vocabulary?
Okay, so this is the question that I was hoping I should have mentioned something. I was hoping you'd start with this question because I thought it was a good opportunity to get into everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you were, like you said, somebody that just wants to start sports betting, doesn't know a whole lot about it, if you had the luxury to collect a bunch of odds makers and professional bettors and inject them with truth serum and then ask them, hey, can you give me some advice on how to get into sports betting? They'd probably tell you not to. Take your money, go home, don't come back. We're going to take it all, and that's that. But obviously, people don't want to hear that. I'm not here. Like I believe everybody. If you're interested in it, try it. But here's my advice: don't bet. Don't bet any money. Sit down, give yourself an imaginary $100 to play with, and see what you can do with that imaginary $100. Track your bets, make your theoretical bets, and just pretend. I know it sounds stupid, but it'll give you a good perspective on things. It'll show you maybe how difficult it is to actually turn a profit. And it'll also teach you some things about how to maybe conserve your bankroll a little better. So I think that's my first piece of advice. But if you are ready to start betting on sports, have a defined bankroll. Don't change your betting sizes all over the place. I mean, if you're into this a little more advanced, then there's things that we could talk about. But if you're just starting out, I would recommend, find a number that you're comfortable losing, because obviously there's a possibility that happens. Even with really good money management, sometimes somebody can go bust, right? But find a reasonable number that's not going to impact your ability to pay your bills or keep a roof over your head. And for God's sakes, don't dip into your kid's college fund.
Please don't. Please do not do that. Please.
Yeah, and I guess this is a good opportunity. If you have a problem with gambling, then just don't even. It can be just as dangerous as the slot machines.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it really can be. So. But have that defined bankroll, and then a good rule of thumb, I guess, would be to just bet around 1% of your bankroll per wager. So if you had $100, you're betting $1 per wager. I mean, it sounds crazy, but think about it. If you lost 30 bets in a row, which is totally possible,
that would be unfortunate. That would suck. I mean, honestly, that would be not great. not great.
No, yeah. For sure. But you would still have, 70% of your bankroll left. You wouldn't. I would just be conservative. There's more advanced methods to calculating how much you should risk on a bet. Now, what I do is I use a fractional version of something called the Kelly criterion method, and it allows me to stake in proportion to my edge. So the bigger edge that I have. The bigger the edge that I have on a game or an event, the bigger my stake will be, if that makes sense, right?
Okay, yeah, that makes a little more sense. Yeah, I again, because I have no idea about anything regarding betting at all, because I've never put a dime on anything, that kind of idea of fractioning off constant bets without fluctuating, that never occurred to me. And that is something that is really, I'm glad you brought that up. I've never thought about that. Again, I've never really put a lot of thought into betting. But if someone is interested in that, and again, if you have a gambling problem, there's definitely help resources that you should contact. because this is a serious problem. And if you don't get help, you might lose everything. And that's obviously not a good idea for a whole lot of reasons, especially if you are supporting a family or whatever it is that you're doing, or even if you're supporting yourself. Probably not the best idea to lose more than you are able to, as you were talking about earlier. And there's definitely there's so many more nuances of betting that even the advanced bettors, right, I'm sure don't necessarily either know about or understand. There's so many little things about betting and how to do it well that really separates, as we talked about earlier, the difference between a seasoned vet and someone that does it based on what they think is going to happen without using any math to kind of back them up.
Yeah, it's something that takes statistical reasoning. I mean, it's not for the faint of heart, right? I mean, I totally believe that you can bet solely for entertainment, and if you do so responsibly, then that's fine. And that I mentioned that in the piece because that was something that people kind of got fired up about, was that I said, what's most important to you? And then when people answered me, I said, most of you are totally wrong. And it's like, well, how can they be wrong? That's their opinion. Well, I mean, if somebody said, and here's what I said in the article, assuming someone went with entertainment because that was one of the choices, because they have bet for fun and have no expectation of turning a profit, there's no need to knock them for it. Some people simply see sports betting as a form of thrill seeking, and as long as they play responsibly, there's nothing wrong with it. But however, if anyone chose win-loss ratio or money management or return on investment, that means they want more out of the experience than just the thrill of having skin in the game, right? So if that's the case, then, like I said, a lot of the people I surveyed were wrong, because value, as I mentioned, is the only thing that matters. If you're smart enough to find value, then you're probably smart enough to manage your risk. You're probably smart enough to, not go bust over over a couple of weeks. So I really think that people should ease themselves into this. Like just like I said, open up a free Google Sheets account and start tracking your bets. So if you bet the Columbus Blue Jackets on Thursday to win against the New York Islanders at minus 125 or whatever they are, and you bet $1.25 to win $1. Well, write that down, track the outcome, how much you won, how much you lost, and track the total amount and your return on investment, and just see how you do. I mean, you're not trying to prove anything to anybody but yourself, and it's a good way to look in the mirror and see if you have what it takes to actually make a go at this, or if you should just do it very recreationally and not invest a whole lot of time trying to figure out how to beat the bookmakers. It can be just something fun that you do, as long as you're doing it responsibly.
So the Penguins and the Oilers right now, second intermission, the Penguins are up 2-1. Did you bet on this game? Did you put anything on the outcome of this game?
No, I did not. My line for the game was Pittsburgh minus 180, which was roughly what the odds were most of the day. So I'm a terrible husband, and I actually went out this afternoon to buy my wife a Valentine's Day gift.
Aww.
And so I didn't.
I wish I had like a board of just sound effects, and I could just press like a crowd awing in unison. I don't have that. I could put it in post, but then it wouldn't make any sense.
But yeah, it's that. See, obviously, the Penguins are going to win that game more often than not. But like I said, I didn't see an advantage. I thought the odds were fair, so I didn't bet on that game. Now, if it was Pittsburgh minus 160 or minus 165 that the bookmakers were offering, well, I probably would have had a bet, but they weren't. So it's just the way it goes.
That's fair. I mean, they're winning right now. They were down 1-0 after one, and they stormed back with 2 goals, like we all know Pittsburgh is very capable of doing, and the Oilers are not very capable of stopping pucks, as we've seen in the better part of the past decade and a half almost. The Pittsburgh Penguins are 4-5-1 in their last 10 games here. They won the previous game against the Flyers a couple of days ago. They're beating the Oilers now. Let's say they hold on to win, and now they have 67 points. That's good for second wild card spot. That would be 3 ahead of the Carolina Hurricanes in the clear right now. And if we switch over to Edmonton, I mean, they are 2 points out of dead last in the West. You have LA and Anaheim, who has won 2 games in their last 80 trillion years, it seems like. They're 2 points ahead of dead last and also 6 points behind second wildcard spot. So the West is a complete and utter mess. Just chaos of who can suck the least to make it to the playoffs. But they've been on the wrong end of some games here. The Avalanche are very close to their name, and they have spiraled out of control. They're falling from the top and are only getting worse from there. It's been a rough couple of weeks for the Colorado Avalanche. But there are some other teams on the flip side that are doing very well for themselves. The Blues have won 7 in a row. They beat the Devils 8-3 last night. If you told me 2 months ago that this team would be in a playoff spot, winning 7 in a row, I mean, I would laugh at you. This was a team 2 months ago that everyone thought, okay, they're going to sell. This is a complete waste of time. Coach Q should have taken over. I said on the show multiple times, either St. Louis or Minnesota should have hired Coach Q. Now, Minnesota should still absolutely sign Coach Q, because Boudreaux, I don't like Boudreaux in Minnesota anymore, but that's beside the point. There are some teams like the Blues, like Chicago has been doing well, 7-3 in the last 10 games, only lost to Boston last night. There are some teams that are on the up and up that are potentially looking to buy, and this leads into my poll question for the day that I tweeted out earlier today. The question was, of the 4 teams that I currently listed, which team will be the biggest buyers at the trade deadline this season? Now, I'm going to read you the 4 responses, but I'm not going to tell you which team is in the lead. I want your answer prior to giving the answer to the poll. The 4 choices were the Flames, the Bruins, the Blues, and the Maple Leafs. Which of the 4, in your opinion, will be the biggest buyers at the trade deadline this season?
I think the Flames are likely to be the biggest buyers. I think Don Sweeney has made it known that he's, being pretty conservative with his approach.
Even with Pastrnak out for a couple weeks.
Yeah, and see, I agree with that. I mean, I don't think that changes anything. I to be honest, as far as the trade deadline and all the trade rumors and stuff like that, it really doesn't interest me a whole lot. The only time that I really even concern myself with any of that is prior to the season, when I'm making long-term predictions, like for the whole entire season. Then I'll, like, for instance, the Columbus Blue Jackets, I recommended prior to the season, although despite the fact that I had them projected to finish second in the Metropolitan Division, 1 point behind the Pittsburgh Penguins, I didn't think they were a team that you should back in a futures market, like to win the Stanley Cup or over under their regular season points totals or whatever, because of the uncertainty surrounding Artemi Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky. But other than that, I don't really pay attention to a whole lot. I would like to see the Boston Bruins make a big splash and grab Mark Stone. I really wouldn't care what they had to give up for him. That would be awesome. I really like that. I'd be super excited to see that, even if it was only as a rental. I'm not somebody that really thinks about the long-term future of the team. So I'm sure there's, a Boston Bruins analyst out there that's like, no, that'll kill us for the future. It'll wreck our prospect depth or whatever. But I just want to see some fun hockey this spring, and Mark Stone in a Boston Bruins jersey would be really fun. But I do think the Flames are probably the team that's most likely to make a big splash at this point out of those 4.
2 teams in the poll are tied. So the poll got over 115 votes. I put it out earlier today, like I said. The Flames and the Bruins are tied with 30% each. The Maple Leafs are second or third, whichever you prefer. Maple Leafs are second with 24%, and the Blues are last with 16%. So there's been some indecisiveness with this poll in particular. I've never had a poll to my knowledge. I also don't have a stats guy. It's me, myself, and I doing the show, so I don't have a stats guy. And I listening through all the other shows and trying to figure this out would take a little too long, especially during recording right now. But I don't think I've ever had a poll tie during recording, so that is definitely interesting. And I do think that there's going to be a lot of buying from these teams trying to fix the holes that are currently visible on this team. And one of the replies that I got to the tweet was from @MillerFan01, and he said, I think Toronto buys even more, putting them closer to competing with the Lightning, but further shrinking their championship window. That fan base is hungry. Now, I would be inclined to agree with him on that, but I do think at the same time that Dubas is going to take into consideration every single pick or prospect that he gives up. I mean, I would assume that all GMs do that, but especially at the deadline to acquire probably a rental or a player that has maybe one more year on their deal, that Dubas really, really, really holds on to every single thing that he can without missing out on a top name. So if he misses out on, let's say, Mark Stone, just as an example, because he didn't give up a 7th-round pick, then that's going to be catastrophic. But I do think that I agree with a lot of what Miller Fan 01 is saying in this instance, because this is one of their best chances to win the cup. But if they do trade more futures for now, their window could be even smaller than it is now.
Yeah, I think you're right about that, but I really don't think Toronto is going to shake things up too much. I think they've got a great team there. I don't think the gap is that big between Tampa Bay, Toronto, and Boston, to be honest. I do think Tampa Bay is the number one team in the league, but I don't think it's as big as some people believe it is. That was my opinion prior to the season, and it really hasn't changed. I think the impact that even some top players have on a team in terms of the playoff chances once they get to the playoffs are very minimal. Sure, they might provide some scoring here or there, but I don't know. I guess it's just kind of silly to me if I was running a team, I wouldn't be trading away valuable futures for a tiny increase in my chances of winning a playoff round or winning the Stanley Cup. I would just go to battle with what I have.
I mean, that's fair. That's also an equally fair response. There are definitely teams that go all out for players, and there are teams that like to stand pat. The biggest example is the Capitals from last season. I mean, what do they do at the deadline besides getting Kempny? They didn't really do anything, and they won the cup. So, which proves, if nothing else besides it could happen once in a blue moon, if nothing else, that
I think it does prove something else. That I'm sure you've heard this before, but like when I was a kid, I mean, as far as I was concerned, if you won the Stanley Cup, you were the best team. But as I've gotten older and I started to look at things a little bit differently, I really do think the team that wins the regular season is the best team. I mean, we're comparing an 82 game sample, traveling all over the North America, playing games, to kind of like an arbitrary tournament where there's a lot of luck involved. I mean, the smaller the sample size, the more luck influences things. So, like Washington, they were the team that they had last year. There is no doubt in my mind that they were significantly worse than the team from the previous 2 years that won the President's Trophy, and the team back in 2010 that got stunned by Yaroslav Halak the year that the Chicago Blackhawks won the Stanley Cup. But like
it was Niemi, I think it was Antti Niemi back when he was a starting goaltender in the NHL. Boy, those were the days, huh? When Niemi got starting goaltender money.
That same year was the year that Yaroslav Halak kind of kicked Price to the curb for a little bit and just stunned both the Pittsburgh Penguins and the Washington Capitals before losing to the Flyers that year. But I mean, I think that I think last year proves that the best team doesn't always win the Stanley Cup, or that the Stanley Cup isn't the trophy that should be given to the best team. It should be kind of given to the luckiest team over the course of 26 games or whatever. The President's Trophy, really, I think there's more skill involved to win that trophy.
Fair. The 2010 Flyers also were not the best team. I mean, they had Michael Leighton carrying them to a Cinderella run. And if you think about it, that shouldn't happen, right? Michael Leighton is currently still playing, not in the NHL, but he's out there somewhere. I think he's in the AHL or somewhere in the minors. And you think about that team and you say to yourself, okay, there's a lot of good pieces on that team, but the goaltending was the biggest negative, and somehow they made it to the final. Now, they did lose to a very fluky manner to eventual Cup champion Patrick Kane in that overtime game, which kind of highlighted the negative that was the goaltending in the end. But they did make it there. They made it to Game 6 with now a minor league goaltender. So, and to your point, that this is very true. There's a lot of luck that goes into playoffs that doesn't go into regular season over the course of 82 games, because again, the sample size is bigger and there's more of everything involved. There's more travel, there's more everything. So to your point, there's a lot of things that go into a playoff run that is not just best team on paper, because if we judge teams based on paper, the Blue Jackets would be better because Bobrovsky would be better, right? And you would have teams that are currently bottom of the barrel, like Chicago, I guess, but with Crawford not playing a lot of the games, then there's a lot of questions there. But you're totally right. If this game was played on paper, then we would be having a different discussion. But because these are real people playing real games, there's a lot that goes into it that is more than just, hey, this guy is good at hockey.
You said something there that kind of brought up a good point. Aside from stirring up awful memories of the Bruins blowing a 3-0 series lead and then a 3-0 Game 7 lead in 2010 to the Flyers.
You won the Cup the next year, so it's all even.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I know. But I mean, that's that was heartbreaking. Yeah. But Sergei Bobrovsky. So yeah, he's not having a great year this year. He's been kind of going in the right direction for the most part. He's started off pretty horrid, but for roughly 3 years, I don't think there's much of an argument against him being the best goalie in the league for the previous 3 years, 2 or 3 years. So in that time, whatever, let's say he played 50 games a season. I think he played more than that. But people seem to be on him about his playoff failures, and we're talking about like 11 or 12 games, something like that, versus 150 games or something, right? Like it's so ridiculous that. And if I was Bobrovsky, and as far as I don't know, you had Allison Lukin on last week, I believe. She might have had some or given you some insight on this, but if Bobrovsky was upset over that, because I think there was some things said at the end of last season about his performance in the playoffs that he wasn't quite happy about. I don't really blame him. I mean, it's like kind of like a what have you done for me lately? And like I said, there's a lot of luck involved in hockey. Sometimes it's just not up to you. Things don't go your way, and you've done everything the same. You practice the same way, you prepared the same way, and then things just don't go your way. A lot of people don't like to hear this, but and a lot of people don't really like to look at sports analytically or statistics, when it comes to statistics and stuff like that.
The eye test and hashtag grit people, the best people in sports, I'm sure.
Well, you know what? Here's a problem. I actually do have a problem with the hockey analytics community in general, and hopefully they don't come with their pitchforks and torches and stuff like that. But I think it's really, really awful to make fun of somebody or to look down at somebody because they enjoy something. Like we're really discussing like glorified exhibition games most of the time. Like half the teams don't make the playoffs. When like Edmonton and Arizona play each other in a week or 2 weeks or something, that's an exhibition game. It doesn't matter. Like there's totally like a low stakes environment most of the time. So
hey, the Coyotes are 4 points out of a playoff spot.
Yeah, no, I'm just I'm
I'm kidding here. Yeah. I know what you mean.
I'm just trying to like pull an example.
Yeah.
But I find it funny that like I've been guilty of this in the past, and I kind of looked at myself in the mirror and said, you know what? If somebody wants to enjoy hockey a certain way, that's up to them. It's a sport. It's entertainment. When it comes to gambling, I think that's where it changes. It's like, well, do you want to be successful or not? Because you're no longer being right just for the sake of being right. You're trying to be right so that you can make a profit. So now there's it's a high stakes environment, and you've got skin in the game. So if you are a hockey fan and you have absolutely no interest in statistics or any of the new modern metrics that are out there, like expected goals and things like that, if you have no interest in that and just want to watch the game and you want to count plus minus and you want to let your emotions do the talking for you when it comes to expressing your opinion about the game, that's totally fine. And I don't think you should let anybody tell you you're wrong for doing that. But if you want to jump in and bet on sports, you have to take a numbers based approach if you're going to be successful.
For sure. I'm gonna dot your last I and cross your last T here. I've said this multiple times on the show. I'm gonna say it again. Pekka Rinne, I have a huge problem with. Kind of going against what you said a little bit with Bobrovsky. Pekka Rinne, I think I said it last week. Pekka Rinne could go 82-0 in the regular season for all I care. When it comes to the playoffs, year after year, he decides not to show up. I mean, it's been a problem for his career, especially in bigger moments like we've seen in the last few years. We've seen it against Pittsburgh in the Cup final. We saw it against Winnipeg last season. When it comes to the regular season, he's a great goalie. No one's taking that away from him. You get to the playoffs, and he can't stop a beach ball to save his life. And I feel like there's a case to be made for a difference between the way Bobrovsky plays in the playoffs versus the way Pekka Rinne plays in the playoffs. Because Bobrovsky plays on a team that has collectively never won a playoff series. So they, as a collective, have a lot more writing on this besides winning the playoff series. It's, can we erase history here? And for the Predators, they played well collectively as a group. But then you have Pekka Rinne that can't stop anything for whatever reason. And that's one of the biggest outliers I've seen, is at least in hockey, how a goaltender could be so good in the regular season and then make it to the playoffs and make a complete 180 year after year after year after year after year. And just, I don't want to say let his team down, but especially in the Pittsburgh series, especially in the Winnipeg series, he kind of did that.
Yeah, I really, I mean, if you're looking for somebody to provide any hot takes, I'm not your guy. I'm really, I mean, it's funny. Somebody said to me on Twitter in response to something. I think I shut somebody down in an argument. They were trying to argue with me, and I was like, no, this is not debatable. It's a fact. I'm not, like, if you want to argue about it, that's your business. But somebody said to me, oh, you must be really fun at parties. And I was like, well, actually, I am. I'm an effing blast, man. Take a hike. And I think I muted them. But if your party, like, I think I am fun at parties. But if your party is like talking about sports and like whether or not a guy showed up or not, I'm probably not that fun. I don't think. I mean, based on the numbers alone, looking at just like the last 4 years that Pekka Rinne was in the playoffs, in all but 1 year, he had a positive goals saved above average, according to Corsica Hockey. So, I mean, is it did he let his team down? I don't know. I once again I just kind of defer to things didn't go his way. He posted 92.3 save percentage at 5-on-5 in the playoffs last year. The year before that, a 93.3, 92.2 in 2015-16. His worst year in the last four was in 14-15. He had a 91.8 5-on-5 save percentage. Would the Predators maybe have a better chance if they had somebody like Henrik Lundqvist, for example? Sure, probably. I mean, but
we're not. He's not going anywhere. By the way, he's not going anywhere because if he does, I mean, Carp. I had Carp on the show a few weeks ago, and he confirmed that Lundqvist isn't going anywhere. Even if Gorton wanted to get rid of, even if he wanted to trade him. But beside the point, the entire collective of New York would lose their minds. So he's not going anywhere. Case closed on that.
I'm actually looking at a signed Henrik Lundqvist New York Rangers puck right now.
So I will Venmo you. How much do you want? And I will DM you my address, and hopefully I will receive it shortly.
Yeah, I used to live downtown when I was a little bit younger, in my early 20s, downtown Edmonton, and I would see hockey players like every day, like just going to get a coffee in the morning. One time I was in the lineup at Tim Hortons. I don't know if you know what that is.
I know Timmy's. I know Timmy's. I'm not a. Come on, I am very cultured in Canadian coffee, man. I know what Timmy's is.
I guess they got their logos plastered all over everything in the NHL. But I was in line-up at Tim Hortons, and I looked behind me, and there's this guy who was like not even, and I'm not a tall guy. I'm like 5'8" on my best day, and I thought.
But on Tinder, you're like 5'10", 5'11", right? No, I'm totally kidding.
Yeah, I looked behind me, and it was hard to recognize him at first because you're used to seeing people with their hockey gear on. But Scott Niedermayer was standing behind me in the lineup, and it was the last game they were in town to play the Oilers, and it was the last game before the 2010 Olympics where he was going to captain them in Vancouver, right? So it was super cool. I got to actually, I walked down Jasper Avenue, which is kind of the main drag in downtown Edmonton, and chatted about the upcoming Olympics and stuff. It was really, really cool. And I had the luxury of meeting a lot of interesting people. Jeremy Roenick, one of my favorites, somebody I hated as a player and as a personality when I was a kid. I just thought he was awful. And I got to talk to that guy for about 25 minutes quite a few years ago, and he was just the nicest guy, telling stories, and really, really cool. But that was great for a couple of years there. It was just on almost a daily occurrence that I would run into some hockey players. So, of course, I started to get some things signed and everything for my future man cave, which I have now.
Consider me very incredibly jealous that you had that opportunity. Andy, this was an absolutely incredible conversation. I mean, I learned more about betting in this hour and change here than I have ever known. And this was a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been a long time coming. I mean, I've been trying to get you on for literally months now, and our schedules have never quite synced up. But today, finally, on a Wednesday, not a Thursday, we finally made it work. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk some hockey with me, talk some betting with me. Tell people where they can listen to your podcast, where they can read your stuff, and where they can follow you on social media.
All right, you can follow me on Twitter at BetAndyBet. Any WWE fans out there will know I copied Kevin Owens' Fight Twitter handle, but whatever. And the at Tic Tac Tout. We're not actually touts. We don't sell anything, but it's just a funny name. If you don't know, a tout is somebody who sells sports picks. And I would say the best, I guess, another piece of advice is don't pay for picks. There are people out there that, I mean, are good and but most people are bad. So I guess the general advice is to not pay for picks. But yeah, check me out on Twitter. I really hope that people maybe, gain some insight and a little bit of knowledge out of this. It's really hard to kind of break everything down in one episode. I mean, really, we could do 100 episodes and just take things really slow and get into the basics, and hopefully we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever you have time to come on. I mean, again, this took longer than both of us want to admit here, but this took a while for us to finally sync up some time. So I really, really, truly, again, appreciate you coming on. Let me know when the next time you have time, and I will definitely try to get you back on as soon as possible.
All right. Thank you very much, Andrew. It was great talking to you.
Absolutely. This has been another episode of Chel Squared Up number 35, episode 36 next week. I'll talk to you then.